Good afternoon. Welcome back. Hope you all had a lovely lunch. Did everyone have something nice to eat? A huge thank you to Hello Better Digital for that lunch. Welcome to the Trimble stage, everybody. Big thanks to our sponsor, Trimble. There are some flyers down here on the edge of the stage if anybody's interested in finding out a bit more about Trimble and what they do. Who is having a good time today? Awesome. Who has checked out the photo wall and had a photo with you and your team? Okay, something to do after. Head to the photo wall. You can have a professional photo taken. We'll make those available probably tomorrow, and you can then download them and have a good photo. Also, please do take photos and put them on social. You can use the hashtag TechSummit25 and make everybody jealous that you've been here today and all of your colleagues are working. Have you enjoyed the innovation zone? Did you get a chance to go and have a look at some of those robots? Pretty amazing, eh? Especially that dog. I really enjoyed that. And exhibitors, who's got the best merch? No, I'm just joking. There's lots of cool things to check out there. Some amazing exhibitors, and thanks to them, that makes this day possible. So go and have a look, and yeah, there's some very cool merchandise out there as well. I will quickly take a moment to introduce myself. Kia ora, my name is Sasha. I'm one of the Canterbury Tech board members here helping to organise today. I'm also the director of Follow My Lead. So our work at Follow My Lead is all about bridging the gap between technology and people. So we create end user training that supports large-scale software rollouts, helping users adopt new systems successfully. So please do come and introduce yourself after or later in the day. Love meeting new people. Hopefully you've also worked out the messaging on the app by now. You can message other attendees. There's photos and contact details on there, and so if you meet someone that you'd like to have a chat with later, quickly find them in the app, flick them a message, and then it'll be sitting there for you to follow up. Before we boot up this session, let's run a quick tech tune-up. Find someone near you that you don't know, could be behind you, next to you, in front of you. I'd like you to introduce yourself and share the favourite piece of tech that you own now. We've got 2 minutes. All right, awesome. Pause that conversation for a moment if you can. Feel free to take that up again after the session. Does anyone want to yell out and share their favourite piece of tech currently? Yep, love it. Robot lawnmower, very cool. Every night or every day? That sounded terrible, didn't it? Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else want to share their favourite piece of tech? We're all a bit too shy. Robot vacuum. Oh yeah, nice. Yeah, love the robot vacuum. I was quite excited to chat to the guys at PB Tech about a robot cleaner that he reckoned in 5 years we'll all have robot cleaners that clean our house for us while we're asleep. So how good? How good? All right, we'll move on. A big thanks to one of our new Tech Summit sponsors this year. Coming on as a gold sponsor is Adaptive. Is anyone here from Adaptive in this session? Woo, Adaptive. No, not here. Adaptive is your data and integration partner. They provide world-class integration, consulting and execution, and data and analytics services. Their expertise has helped multinational enterprises across New Zealand and Australia modernise legacy systems, bridge data silos, and streamline operations, delivering clear and measurable value to their bottom line. Let's have a look.
Tech complexity is real. Systems don't talk, data gets stuck, and legacy platforms just slow you down. That's where we can help. Adaptive, your data and integration partner. We bring clarity to design, integrate, and support systems that scale with your business. Trusted by clients across Australia and New Zealand and backed by the best tools in the game. Keen to learn more? Let's chat.
Cool, so you can head along and chat to the Adaptive team if you want to in the ASX exhibition zone. Let's get on to the good stuff. First up, we have, welcome to Stream 2. So we're on the Trimble stage, Scaling Beyond Borders. What you need to know about EU trends, the Cyber Resiliency Act and data sovereignty. So this session is broken up into two parts. First, we'll hear from Dale Wheeler, Enterprise Account Executive at Canonical. Dale will introduce us to the CRA and how you need to be approaching your design and delivery if you want to be able to access the EU market in the future. Dale has been in the New Zealand IT industry for over 30 years. He's worked for IBM, HPE, Oracle, SUSE, Cognizant, and more recently, Canonical. He has extensive experience across the hardware, cloud, software stacks, and integration and security of these in a modern hybrid cloud environment. IoT and edge devices and their management are also in his scope of knowledge. He has access to international trends and can inform us about what is happening in other markets that are likely to affect us or the products we wish to export. Please welcome Dale.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Sasha, and I can never stand behind one of those things, so yeah. First of all, how do you say that? Canonical. I have to explain that to quite a few people. Has anyone ever heard of Canonical? Good. Ubuntu. Anyone heard? Ubuntu, very, very well known. Canonical, not quite so known. We created Ubuntu. So that's where Ubuntu is from. And Canonical is based in the UK, and that's quite important because I'm talking about the Cyber Resiliency Act from Europe. UK is right in the middle of that. So just a quick plug on what Canonical do is we are primarily a Linux, but mainly open source provider. So our biggest competition obviously is Red Hat in New Zealand, and we are very actively, aggressively competing with them. We have Linux kernels for normal systems and embedded systems specifically. So when you're talking about devices, we have very, very specific knowledge in that, which is where the Cyber Resiliency Act really comes in. We also support open source projects, but I think what's more important for most of New Zealand is on the right-hand side is that we support all of those underlying utilities that are open source packages that no one else supports. Like anyone use Python? Python 2? We support Python 2. PHP, Perl, OpenJDK, a whole lot of Postgres, SQL, MySQL, so all those utilities that actually get used by applications. We supply security and patching for up to 12 years for those, and we backport them when the vulnerabilities are found. So that's enough of that. I'm here to talk about the Cyber Resiliency Act, and why am I talking about that in New Zealand? Has anyone heard of GDPR? What happened was Europe came up with a data privacy rules. It's rippled entirely around the world. Cyber Resiliency Act is going to do exactly the same thing. Europe is well advanced in how do we manage security and updates for devices that are proliferating all around the world. And all of those devices have software in them. And here in New Zealand, we have a huge development environment. You've seen a robot out in the area. The software inside that will be an operating system somewhere and a whole lot of applications. If you want to sell into Europe, you need to know about the Cyber Resiliency Act. And what you need to do now is because in 2027, it's enforced. So if you don't comply, you cannot sell into the European Union. And I believe that this will ripple right around the world, just the same. So basically, what is it aiming to do? The Cyber Resiliency Act was in Europe. They were very worried about embedded software having all sorts of embedded things in that other governments may or may not be using for your information, etc. So there was a bit of security in there, but also a lot of devices were just being launched into the market with no plan. In 5 years' time, a vulnerability appears. What do we do about it? So they came up with this act that says they want to safeguard the end user and businesses buying those devices so that there is a plan to support them. The regulation does exclude software as a service and specifically very strict controlled environments like the medical environment, aerospace being Airbus mainly, and marine equipment. They have specific FDA rules in the health environment, etc. So they are very specific and are covered, but there's a plethora of drones and all sorts of other devices that are not covered that. But it's especially relevant to device manufacturers. So if you're creating, for instance, Tate in Christchurch, they create devices that get shipped all over the world. They must comply to these rules. So what are they? So there's 4 parts to the CRA, and I am not going to go through every single detail of those things. I just want you to have a highlight. And when the presentations are published, if you look at the notes for this presentation, there's a link to the Cyber Resiliency Act, and I will refer to Annex 1, Annex 2, or so you can see where the relevant parts, if you really want to get bored after lunch, that's where you can go. But basically, the 4 elements that it's doing is a risk assessment. So when you're creating or developing a product, you need to do risk assessment. What if this happens? What if there's a cyber attack? What if there's no power? Just basic risk assessment. And I suspect in New Zealand we're very advanced in doing this. We just need to have documentation that proves it. So they can refer to a point where your documentation says, if this happens, this is what you do, or this is who you call. Is there a website? Real basic stuff. It's not actually that onerous. There is a conformity assessment, and I'll show you a symbol that was mentioned in the imaging section, EC. If you've seen that, that's the European conformity. That's what it actually stands for. I had to look it up, because I've seen it on so many power plugs, EC. That's what it's, European conformity. They do an assessment, and I'll show you where that fits into the value chain. And vulnerability reporting, very similar to the GDPR. If you discover a vulnerability that affects your product, you must publish that and what to do about it. So, and if you don't, there are penalties. And like the GDPR, the penalties reflect a percentage of your company's revenue. So it's very significant. You do not want to go there. So what are the categories? Most 90% of devices or things that are covered by this Act are self-assessment. So you don't have to submit this to a committee that may take between 6 weeks and 2 years to sign things off, which is kind of what happens with the FDA. It's really, really complicated. They expect most devices, most code, to be a self-assessment. So you assess it yourself and inform them, yes, we've gone through the assessment, we've ticked all the boxes. And it's up to them to come back and say, to test you if they ever want to, but they typically don't. So that covers pretty much 90% of the products that are covered by this Act. Things like Python and React languages, they are covered within that 90%. The 10% are that need specific certifications, and hopefully there's no one in this room that really needs this, but there are some devices that you will need this for. So critical class 1 is a low risk, and then the very high risk is more orientated towards my company, because we create operating systems, CPU, runtimes, etc. Well, it's kind of a bit of both. Anything that's got security embedded into it can very quickly, or provides security information, can become in this critical phase. And you need to go through a specific assessment and get ticked off manually for each one of those. And now's the time to do that. So there's the symbol that you've probably seen on most power supplies for devices these days, and never knew what it actually stood, or was it just me? So that's European conformity, and they always have it around the wrong way, but it's conformed to Europe standards, so that's health and safety and security. That's an assessment that you go through in order to be able to sell into the European Union. You must be certified with those. And the Cyber Resiliency Act is a part of that as well. So it enforces the security for those connected devices. So it's created a list of the specific security requirements in that complete supply chain. I'll get to the next slide, which kind of explains the product life cycle. But the key there is in bold. It's the life cycle of the connected devices. So this is not a one-off statement. It's for the life of your product. Or as you see here, now this is a little hard to read, and this is the chart that I see as it refers to where the different sections are of the Cyber Resiliency Act. There is not a test on this at the end of this presentation. But basically, I just want you to see the little part that says there are things to think about in your design and development phase, and they refer to specific Annex 1, Section 1, and this is the slide that's got the reference to the Cyber Resiliency Act if you want to go into those. But there is a maintenance phase, and you must supply a way of supporting your product and actions, therefore, for either 5 years or the life of the product, whichever is shorter. So fortunately, in most cases, that will be 5 years. But there's no time frame on the design and development phase. So you need to have a plan for probably 7 years of how you will support your product in order for it to be able to be sold into the European Union at all. So it's all the security and things. And now at the bottom, if you see there's a problem, you must report it to them within 24 hours. That's a very important thing to know. Once your product's on the market, you've got 24 hours to report it if there's a vulnerability. Otherwise, you will be fined. Now, importantly, this does not get into compliance until 2027. At this stage, it might change because some of the rules that they came up with were supposed to be enforced now, but they haven't actually been enforced yet. But let's assume 2027. So you've still got a bit of time to get that in place. So some of the essential security requirements. So if your device or your application has anything to do with data integrity, confidentiality, anything that you need to mitigate if there's a distributed denial of service of any kind, you've just got to have processes in place, but you've got to think about future vulnerabilities. So just plan for if there was a vulnerability that came up, what is the process that you need to go to? You just need to document it, and that will give you that assessment to do that. And vulnerability management requirements, there it is there. So regularly identify and document vulnerability. Again, it's not a one-off thing you do at the design stage because this market, the geopolitical situation is real, particularly in Europe. Things are changing really fast and who they depended on has changed markedly. So you need to have a cycle of review of vulnerabilities particularly, and you must publicly disclose any information about vulnerabilities and mechanisms. How do you get around it? How do you update? And regularly update to minimise anything that's exploitable. And from a canonical perspective, in conclusion, we own operating systems and we have embedded devices specifically. We do a lot of embedded devices. So if you ever look at an airport screen, the underlying operating system, for instance, is an Ubuntu core operating system in there. And it's not our application, so if it fails, it's not necessarily the operating system, I'll just say that. But part of our commitment is the Cyber Resiliency Act says we have to have positions in place, for instance with a screen that says we can update that screen without someone climbing up a ladder, putting a USB key in to sort that out. It's all done remotely, we've got tools to do that. And that's a simple example of what the Cyber Resiliency Act is trying to do, is to automate fixes so that the end user just doesn't buy devices and that gets thrown at them and walk away. It's the 30-second spray and walk away. They don't want that in the European market. So that's what we're committed to do. Our operating system's already compliant, but we also have a lot of packages that we actually support that are not ours as well. So we're also doing the self-assessments to do that. So the critical products we've already done the assessment, and there's only a few firms in Europe that are allowed to do those assessments. So it's kind of important, if you are on that critical list, you need to get in fast because they only have about 4 companies in the whole of Europe that are allowed to perform those assessments because they're obviously very strict controls. So just be aware of it. And again, my challenge to you is if you are in the software development environment, if you're creating devices, if you're doing drones, if you're doing software that you want to sell into the European market now, but probably worldwide at some stage, be aware of the Cyber Resiliency Act. Just do some research. Hopefully this will be enough to give you some clues and say it's basic stuff. Document everything, have a plan for vulnerability and security, and have a plan for supporting that product for at least 5 years, and you will be fine. And then you can tick off, yes, we've done a self-assessment. Unless, of course, you are doing medical devices or something that's, using and publishing or holding personal information is always the one you have to watch on. That's a whole different level that you need to go through assessment. So that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Sasha for the next session. Questions will hold to the end, if that's all right. Thank you.
Thank you. As Dale said, we'll hold questions until the end, and then we'll have both Dale and Chris come up together. So, our next speaker this session is Chris Cormack. As European governments increasingly migrate away from US tech giants towards locally controlled digital infrastructure, what lessons can Aotearoa learn? Chris will explore how data sovereignty movements in Denmark, Germany and across the EU intersect with our unique obligations under Te Reti o Waitangi. Chris, kai tahu, katu ma moi, Waitaha, is a proponent of Māori data sovereignty. As the original developer of Koha, the world's first open source library management system, Chris has spent over 25 years advocating for digital solutions that honour Indigenous values and community ownership of data. Chris has presented internationally on Indigenous data sovereignty, including at the International Indigenous Librarians Forum and various European conferences on digital rights and open source alternatives. Throughout his work at Catalyst, he's helped organisations across Aotearoa implement data sovereignty principles while maintaining technical excellence, and continues to advise government and private sector organisations on ethical data governance frameworks. Please welcome Chris to the stage.
Tēnā tātou. I te tuatahi ngā mihi ki a koutou ku huhumua nei ki te whakarongo ki au. I tēnei kōrero mō ngā take o te wā. Te tuarua, ngā mihi ki ngā whanauka, te mana whenua o te ruhinga, ngai tuahu riri. I te tuatoru ngā mihi ki ngā kaiwhakahaere o tēnei hui. I won't do the entire talk in te reo Māori. One day I'll be able to do an entire talk in te reo Māori and have the entire audience understand. Unfortunately, today's not that day, but we will try again maybe next year. So you've got a year to learn. There we go. So yeah, I'm mostly, even though I'm following on from Dale, and it was really good because Dale and I only met last week, but we worked in this parallel kind of spheres for a long time. And he finished talking about personal data, and that's kind of where the rise of the data sovereignty movements come from. So it kind of gave me a little segue in. So a little bit, I went to the Toitū Te Reo Festival in Heretaunga last year, and there was I think it was Here Ni Moko Mead, but forgive me if I'm wrong, but one of the amazing speakers said, in Te Ao Māori, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So there's a thing, it's like knowing who the people are, knowing their backgrounds, then you can decide whether they're worth listening to. So I'll give you a little bit of mine. If you decide I'm not worth listening to, the doors are open behind you and you can head on out. That is fine. So I'm Kaitahu Kaitema Moe in Waitaha. I'm from down here, from Moeraki, but I was born in Kawakawa up in the far north, and I grew up there until the freezing works in Moere were closed, and then my parents moved down to Whanganui, moved there as well. And so Te Reo Māori was my first language, and I've got progressively worse at it ever since. And that's a function of working in the tech industry where I very rarely get to use Te Reo Māori in a tech setting. Conversationally, yes, but when we start getting into the actual, pulling apart of, talking about layer 3 networking and stuff, people's reo often runs out quite fast. Right, I'm using up too much time. I'm going to move on. So what we're talking about, so I want to talk about, let's move beyond following the EU. Let's move beyond following the US. Let's move beyond following Australia. Let's think about what we can do here in Aotearoa ourselves to do things in our way. So the EU's focus, and it works really well. The GDPR has had a massive effect a positive effect around the world. I think that most people would agree, even though it was annoying for us to all have put a thing to say, do you accept cookies up? It has actually, the way they look after people's data in Europe is markedly better than they do in a lot of places in the world. But it is a very regulatory compliance and resiliency focus. It's a very the stick, not the carrot approach. Whereas in Aotearoa, we already have world-leading frameworks for ethical data governance, and we can use some of those as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about those and go through those and as much as I can in the short time available. Normally when I'm talking about Māori data sovereignty, it's a 4-hour workshop. So I'm going to compress that into 15 minutes, and I'm wasting time, so I'm going to move to the next slide. You can read the quotes there, and I will make all these slides available afterwards as well, and links to the Māori data governance frame model and to the Māori data sovereignty model. So if we look through here, kind of in the European model, we see that data is seen often as an economic asset. It's seen as the focus is on individual privacy rights and regulatory compliance driven. And in a Māori data sovereignty model way of looking at it, data is a taonga, is a treasure, it's a gift. It's something to be nurtured, it's something to be cared for, something to be looked after, not something to be extracted from. Often you'll hear the phrase, data is the new oil. I think I would like to flip that on its head. If we treat data the way we treated oil, we're going to do tremendous harm to ourselves, like we have done the way we've treated oil. We focus on individual rights as well, but on collective rights alongside individual. And a lot of societies do that same kind of thing. It's not uniquely Māori, but kind of capitalist Western societies have gone very far down the individual track. And we put a lot of emphasis on relationships and responsibilities or reciprocity. And we consider future generations in almost everything we do. One of the best things when I'm working with iwi organisations is that when you talk to them about their short-term plan, that's a 500-year plan. You know, they're thinking seven generations ahead at a minimum kind of thing. So much different way of kind of considering and thinking about things. So in the, I want to say 2016, but ever since COVID, I have no concept of time anymore. There's like pre-COVID and post-COVID, and it's all 1 year beforehand and all 1 year afterwards. So sometime before COVID, I think around 2016, Te Manaraunga, which is the Māori Data Sovereignty group, published these 6 principles. Te Manaraunga was formed out of a bunch of people, mostly working in academic spaces. So there was Professor Tahu Kukutai from Waikato University, who's a demographer, so studies populations. Paparangi Reid, who's a professor in School of Medicine in Auckland, and a few others who are all used to doing ethical approvals for doing research, but there was no consideration of the data as part of the ethical thing. There was like a whole lot of other ethical hoops you had to jump through, but no one asked, where's the data stored? Who has access to it after your research is finished? Who gets a say on how your research is published? So Te Manaraunga is an advocacy network, it's a voluntary network, and it's set up with people who have got common interests. And so they came up with these 6 principles, which are now influencing Indigenous data movements globally. They're based these, I'll go through them as rangatiratanga, well, you've probably heard that word before, a loose approximation in English as authority. Almost all of these are a thesis topic in and of themselves to explain the whole concept behind, but I'll just leave it with one word. Then we have whakapapa, which in this context, you'll often hear that in the relationship, meaning genealogy, but in this one it's just meaning relationships. So in that way we talk about all data has whakapapa, so all data is related to other data or related to things. You don't think of data as isolated data points. What is the next one? Kotahitanga, collective benefit. You probably heard that word a lot recently as well with the new Māori Queen and the rise of the Kotahitanga movement, which is just not doing everything the same, but doing everything with the same purpose, if that makes sense. I think it's manaakitanga, which is reciprocity, and so that's that kind of idea that, say I'm a researcher doing a study on urban youth, I shouldn't, and the university and or the company that I work for shouldn't be the only people that benefit from the output of that research. The urban youth should as well, that reciprocity idea around it. And kaitiakitanga, guardianship, for want of a better word. Which one did I miss? Oh, whanaungatanga, sorry, obligations, thank you. It's really small on the screen over here, so I should look, yep. Whanaungatanga, which is, obligations. Often you hear whakawhanaungatanga that's making connections and stuff as well. So moving on from the principles, in 2023, Te Kahui Raunga, who I also work for, created this Māori data governance model. So it's structured around 8 po, or posts. I often think of them as 7 po, with the data classification po being the whenua, the ground that the posts are grounded in. If you don't classify your data, how could you look after it carefully so the rest of them don't work? This is a whole model. It's 74 pages. I obviously can't do 74 pages now, but it's based around these ideas that it's a model that we wrote. It's co-designed between Te Kahui Raunga, the Department of Internal Affairs and Statistics New Zealand, to provide a model for how to look after Māori data in a better way. And if you just took Māori out of there, how to look after data in a better way. Pretty much everything that is in there would make all your data practices better. It's just that we had not a wedge, for want of a better word, in by coming in through the Māori data lens. There's a lot of, the main area in there that needs a lot of work in here in Aotearoa is the capacity and capability part. So we need more Māori data scientists, more Māori network engineers, more Māori things. I may be the only Māori person talking here today. I'm not sure about that. There might be other stealth Māori like me that you can't tell, but I think I am. So we need more of us in the industry as well. But all of this means that, so this kind of the real impact of this model was to move from that kind of extractive to a generative relationship. So thinking of data as something we nurture and look after rather than we extract value from. And so leading on to kind of my final kind of slide before I wrap up and leave some time for questions, is that we have a real opportunity here in Aotearoa to do some global leadership here. We have a trusted data jurisdiction at the moment. I won't say too much about the current government, but they're doing their best to destroy that. But over 80% of our power is renewable. So we have an Indigenous-led innovation in data governance. We have a model that other Indigenous nations around the world are using as the basis of theirs. We have some world-first legislation, which I'm hoping you all know of. So the Awatupua Act, so the act that gave the Whanganui River effective legal personhood. So we've done some things, some thinking outside of the normal ways that other countries do. We've got opportunities here to become a leader in this space rather than a follower. And so, yeah, kind of our challenge is, are we going to export our values through our technology, or are we going to import regulations from overseas? That's kind of the choice I think we can make. And yeah, we can become a global leader and potentially be a place where people are. When I was writing this, I was thinking more in an Indigenous lens, so that a place where other Indigenous nations will see it safe to house their data. This is a big problem in the US at the moment, where data is being deleted on purpose and histories are being rewritten. So you have Indigenous nations there that need somewhere outside of the US jurisdiction to put their data. But why not all places? Be a safe haven. We could be, no, not the Switzerland, because they do horrible things in the past, but we could be something like that for data. Yeah, I don't know why I went there, sorry. And I'll stop talking now. So yeah, that was pretty much me. I hope I followed Dale and didn't disjoint it too much. Okay.
You two take a seat there and I'll pop up here. How does that sound? Thank you very much, both of you. Some definite things to think about. Some changes to be made. I've got some questions here. Please do put some in the chat if you have questions for Chris as well. First one for you, Dale. Is it expected that there will be a price bump for devices in them being made compliant to the CRA?
Yeah, there's a $1 million question. No, the simple answer is not expected, but how do you predict the future? Compliance does tend to add price to things, but it depends where it's come from. It really goes into the development cycle. So if you design it up front, typically there's no additional cost. It's just the way that it flows through. And documentation, and particularly documentation, is something that we should all be doing anyway. So generally no, but of course you can't say for everything, but I would hope not, but we'll see. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Leading on from that, what level or volume of impact do you see cyber resiliency requirements having on New Zealand businesses, particularly for products and services sold beyond the EU, so in the worldwide market?
At this stage, it's only focused on the EU, but I can't believe it won't be adopted pretty much everywhere else, just like GDPR. Mm-hmm. So I think we've got a window of opportunity to do something about it now while we've got time. And I think our business practices here are not third world, so it's quite structured in the way that we typically develop things anyway. So typically the quality is good enough anyway. It's just ticking the boxes. It's like an audit requirement. If you design it right, the boxes are pre-ticked. And that, to me, is the message I want to get across to New Zealand, because we've got so much really interesting development going on here. And just looking at that imaging thing that was done here, that could be rippled around the world. That's a medical tech. They have compliance up the wazoo, and the FDA is, sorry, but it's a completely corrupt environment. So the stuff you have to do to get through that, Europe is typically a little bit better, but they have rules that are there. But cyber resiliency is just something that it's really important to just design it in, and it won't be a problem, because it's we can predict where things will be vulnerable. The problem is at the end of the life cycle, 5 years afterwards, trying to predict what could possibly go wrong. Most vulnerabilities that people find is products that were produced at least 5 years ago anyway. And that's the trick. And it's like that Canonical, we backport those changes 5 years into previous versions so that it all ripples through to do that. But not everyone does that. But if you design your product right up the front, so you've got a mechanism to apply a change right back there, and that's just versioning. Change control, it's something that CrowdStrike had to learn. Those sort of things. Change control is very important, and save all that data. Yep.
A few more questions here. Is the CRA enforced for devices produced by a company if the company no longer exists within the 5 years after production? Is that the nitty?
The answer is actually
determined?
yes, it is. How they chase them, I have no idea, but they are specifically saying, we'll come after you. You can't just go bankrupt. They'll come after the individuals. Yep. Just like GDPR.
Question here for you, Chris. What are your thoughts on the recent AWS data centre issues of build versus buy? Is this a data sovereignty play?
I can't answer that honestly on the stage here, wearing my Catalyst t-shirt. So given my political thing, it's cool to have more infrastructure in. I would encourage people to read up on things like the Cloud Act and stuff out of the US and see how it actually doesn't. Residency doesn't equal sovereignty, is probably how I'll politically correctly say it. I'll stop.
Another one here, with the ever-increasing facial recognition, what is your recommendation to incorporate data sovereignty practices?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a real good one, because you know that the one of the people that were caught in the trial and falsely accused and had to go through a whole, was a Māori woman with a moko kauai, so a facial thing. So there's people who will tell you that now we need to train it on more people with moko, with facial tattoos and stuff, and I was like, that's the wrong answer. Maybe we don't need to use it in places that are essential technology, like essential places like a supermarket, those kind of things. So I'd more on the what is the going like probably what a privacy commissioner would say. What is the risk of not using it versus the benefit of using it versus the risk of using it? Like, look at that kind of thing. So they said it was to prevent harm to workers, and that's pretty hard to quantify whether it did or not, because how do you prove a negative? But the other uses of technology, it was really about loss prevention, in my opinion, but there are better ways of doing that. They have ones that can watch your hand on the self-check machine, not your face, not have to recognise. We do a lot of things against the Privacy Commission Act. Like, you've all probably been in a store and they put photos up of people who have shoplifted. That's a breach of privacy. You can't do that. So we often lead, we do the wrong thing until we're told not to. And I'd like us to get to the place where we think about it before we get told it's wrong.
Yeah, great answer. Right, sorry team, we need to wrap up so that you can get to your next session. So please feel free to have a chat with Chris or Dale after or later on in the day. Some very interesting talks there. Thank you for both very much. Here's a candle as a thank you for both of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well done.